Hello, I'm Edith Matlock, the Executive Director of the Carmelite Institute of North America, and I would like to welcome you all today to our first live streaming webinar. The Carmelite Institute of North America's mission is to promote the spirituality and tradition of Carmel. We are doing this by sponsoring such events such as these live webinars, days of recollection in different parts of North America, our symposium, our annual Carmelite lecture. The Institute is a collaborative effort of the 5 Carmelite provinces of North America. Please look for our future events on our website, carmelstream.org, or on our Facebook page. The Carmelite Institute functions by means of donations from our provinces and from individuals. As you noticed, there was no registration fee for this, our very first webinar. However, we would like to ask if you would be kind enough to give a donation to help us with the cost of airing this. You can donate on our website, through PayPal, or by sending in a donation to our address in Washington, D.C., which is also on our website. For the purpose of this webinar, you will be able to ask questions. If you scroll down a little bit below what you're seeing now, there is a place there for you to type in your questions, and at the end of Father Donald's speech, he will be answering questions. Now at this time, I would like to introduce you to Father Donald Kinney of the Discalced Carmelites. Father Donald grew up in a good Methodist church family in Georgia. He attended the University of Tennessee and spent his junior year studying in Paris. He returned to Paris for 2 more years to study the language and literature. After that, he taught French at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California. After 2 years, he resigned and came into the Catholic Church in 1980. St. Therese's story of a soul inspired Father Donald to become a Carmelite. In 1980, he entered the Discalced Carmelites Friars of the California-Arizona province. He was ordained a priest in 1988. Father Donald has spent most of his ministry in formation as novice master in San Jose, California, and as student master in Mount Angel, Oregon. In 1995, he translated the poetry of St. Therese for ICS publications. Father Donald now serves as the OCDS provincial delegate for his province, and he now resides at El Carmelo Retreat House in Redlands, California. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Father Donald Kinney.
Thank you very much, Edith Matlock of the Carmelite Institute of North America, based in Washington, D.C. Steve Benthel is our technical advisor in Long Island, New York. We've had several training sessions together. This is something I've never done before. It's very exciting, and I'm really grateful to the Carmelite Institute for inviting me to share a little with you about 2 brand new saints in the Catholic Church, Saints Louis and Zelie Martin, canonized on October 18th, the very first couple in history to be canonized together as a married couple. People are watching this webinar all over the world, including some of my family, some of the French family in Paris I lived with 40 years ago. More will be seeing this later on the Carmelite Institute's website. St. Therese wrote in her autobiography, Story of a Soul, "I would like to preach the gospel simultaneously on all the continents." Well, her great desire is coming true right here and now as we talk about her parents. This is very exciting. I feel a little like a pilot with this headset. We'll ask the Lord to take us right up to the heights as we're inspired by this wonderful couple whom I've come to love very much. I have here a little first-class relic of St. Louis and Zelie Martin, so a little they're here with us from heaven to inspire us and be with us today. I'd like to begin with a prayer. We have a whole book of prayers written by Saint Therese. We have one prayer that her mother, Zélie, wrote. And Saint Therese talks about this prayer in Story of a Soul. I'll give you the reference, even page 38, talking about when she was a little girl. She says, "I loved God very much and offered my heart to him very often, making use of the little formula Mother had taught me." And this is that little prayer, the first prayer all the girls learned from their mother as soon as they could memorize. "Oh my God, I give you my heart. Take it so that no one will have it but you. Oh my Jesus." I'll say that again. "Oh my God, I give you my heart. Take it so that no one will have it but you. Oh my Jesus. Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit." Many prayers have been answered, and there's much excitement about the canonization of St. Louis and Zelie Martin. The world has long called St. Therese the greatest saint of modern times, but obviously we wouldn't know her if not for the parents who raised her. However, they were canonized for their own holiness and for their powerful intercession. As you will see, as we will see, these two hardworking parents are a stunning example of holiness in marriage. They became holy through all the duties and trials of life. They raised a happy family despite much sadness. Zélie dying young of cancer, Louis left a single father, then suffering the humiliation of dementia. Their canonization, and hopefully this talk, is meant to encourage all of us in our families. Let me tell you a little about this beautiful couple. You'll love them and be able to relate to them very well, I'm sure. Now, Steve will put up a genealogy table of the Martin family. Both Louis and Zélie lived in Alençon, France, in what is the province of Normandy. Louis was born, you'll see on the second line of this genealogy table, Louis was born in 1823, and he married Zélie. Her baptismal name was Azélie, but everybody called her Zélie. She was born in 1831. She's 8 years younger. You see they were married in Alençon on July 13th, 1858. That's the year of the apparitions of Our Lady to Saint Bernadette in Lourdes. Now, at this time in France, if you wanted a private wedding that would be very religious and you didn't want to spend much money, you got married at midnight. And so that's what Louis and Zélie did. They were married at midnight. Now comes a point of their life which is quite different from our culture today, but I must say very refreshing. They didn't know anything about the birds and the bees. Louis had wanted to be a monk living in chastity, and Zélie had wanted to be a nun. And on their wedding night, right away, they decided to live as brother and sister. However, a few months later, a priest, when they were going to, each one was going to confession, heard one of them allude to this, and he counseled them to have children. That they certainly followed his advice, because in the next 13 years, they had 9 children. And now Steve will scroll down to the second half of the page and look at the list of Louis and Zélie's children. There are 9 children. The first, you'll see that all the children, girls and boys, had the first name Marie. That was a custom in pious families in France at the time. There was Louise, or who was called Pauline, Marie, and then Pauline, who was the first to enter the Carmelite monastery, as we'll hear later. The third child was Léonie. Now, there's a lot of attention on Léonie now because her cause for canonization, believe it or not, was open last summer. Léonie was the problem child. She probably had attention deficit disorder, a lot of illness for the first year of her life. She was between life and death, a lot of complexes when she was an early teenager just before her mother died. They found out that the maid of the house whom they trusted so much was emotionally abusing Léonie. She's been called the ugly duckling who became the swan, and it would be very nice if she was a saint one day. Let's keep going down the list. There's Hélène, you see, and I'll be telling you about these children: Joseph, John the Baptist, Céline, who died in 1959, the last one to die at 89, Melanie Therese, and Saint Therese herself, who died in 1897. Thank you, Steve. You can take down that chart now. Louis trained to be a watchmaker. Zélie studied to make Alençon lace. We call both of those very contemplative professions that take a great deal of concentration and care, attentiveness, patience, perseverance, working long hours, a high level of craftsmanship. To make a watch or to make lace is a real labor of love and sacrifice. Think of Louis making a watch, how he had to align and synchronize the tiny springs and gears and wheels that made up that watch. Imagine him thinking of his family as he worked, especially of one family member perhaps who wasn't doing so well, and praying for her as he worked. Think of Zélie making a piece of lace. I read that it takes 8 years of study to know how to make Alençon lace. It's so delicate. And to make a piece of lace the size of a postage stamp, it takes 7 hours of work. Zélie was in charge of a whole business of lace making. She had a whole group of women working with her. She would give them a little piece to sew, and once a week, they would bring that back to her. Sometimes she would see that there would be delicate repairs if the fabric was damaged, and her specialty was sewing all the pieces together so that the seams wouldn't show. Isn't that what a mother does in a family? You can imagine Zélie as she sewed, often thinking of her family and perhaps of one child in particular who needed more of her love and effort. It's no wonder that their youngest daughter, Therese, grew up doing the little things doing the little things with much love. Why, that's the way Zélie and Louis taught their whole family to live, to do the little things with much love. And when Louis would finish a watch, and when Zélie would finish a piece of lace, don't you think they would hold it up with a great sense of accomplishment and happy that they had finished it, and they would hold it up for others to admire? Don't you think that that is just what God is doing now with our new saints, Louis and Zelie Martin? He's holding them up for the whole world to admire. I chose the title Saints Louis and Zelie Martin, The Little Things and the Hard Things with Much Love. You'll hear that so much of the Martins' life was very, very hard. The purpose of my talk is to encourage you and me in the love we bring to our families, especially when times are hard. Now, let me give you a portrait in words of Saints Louis and Zélie. You'll see that a number of their gifts were passed on to their daughters. People always said that Louis was the perfect gentleman. He had a warm, open face and was on the quiet side, a real contemplative, a great reader of the classics, but he was also a great mimic, and he loved to laugh. He was taller than average. He was athletic. As a young man, he had saved a boy from drowning. He loved to walk, he loved to travel, and he went on several pilgrimages. He was an expert fisherman. Once his brother-in-law teased him, saying, "Oh, Louis, the fish have heard that you're coming, and they're all swimming away." Louis was talented in drawing, and we have several of his sketches. In Alençon, he helped found all-night adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. He was a member of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Everyone knew Louis as a man of true integrity. Zélie was petite, shorter than average, with dark brown hair always pulled back in a bun and dark eyes. She was vivacious, enthusiastic, and witty. She was a gifted lace maker and businesswoman, an incredibly hard worker, sometimes overwhelmed with her lace making, a marvelous letter writer. She was a homebody. She had a good sense of humor, and she loved to tease. Above all, she had a resolute, fearless faith. Before her marriage, she had joined the confraternity of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Later, she became a Third Order Franciscan. After the birth of their third child, Louis sold his jewelry shop to help his wife manage her lace-making business and to help her at home. This was rare in the 19th century. The Martins lost 4 children in 4 years, yet what is amazing is that they kept loving and supporting each other and growing through those tragedies in their faith. We can learn from them that God gave them strength and peace through the mutual support of a family praying together, their daily rosary and daily mass. The Martins, Louis and Zélie, would get up to go to the workers' mass on weekdays at 5:30 in the morning. They were known for carefully keeping the Sabbath, visiting the sick, and helping the poor. And sometimes they would even take poor people, homeless people, into their home. They raised their children to be saints, and they struggle to be saints themselves. We read that over and over in their letters. Despite so much suffering in their family, they were really happy and joyous. We read about them going on outings in the country, spending the afternoon at the fair. Sometimes on cold evenings, they would gather around the fireplace and roast chestnuts. They would sing together, write poetry. The girls would put on plays for their parents, and Louis would make them all laugh with his imitations. You just have to read the story of the Martin family. I'm going to hold up the book for you to see it. A Call to a Deeper Love, the family correspondence of the parents of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. This is published by Alba St. Paul Press, translated by, Pauline Press, Alba House, by Ann Hess and Dr. Fran Renda, and they did a wonderful job. I know Dr. Fran Renda very well, and this is a marvelous book. You really have to get this book. Zélie wrote 217 letters, and Louis was not a letter writer. We have 13 letters by him. Here is also a book that you might know or want to get, by Joseph Piat, originally written in French, translated into English into 1948, called Story of a Family. This helped the family of Saint Therese to be known throughout the world. I also recommend very much to you the Archives of the Carmel of Lisieux. If you Google Archives, Carmel, and Lisieux, you will find that incredible archives, much of it translated in English, of a very high scholarship, and much of the information that I have you will find on that website. Now I'd like to tell you in some detail about 6 years in this family's life, when there were 6 deaths in 6 years. We began in 1865 when Louis's father, whom they had taken to live with them, died. Zélie writes to her sister-in-law, "My father-in-law died yesterday. I admit I'm terrified of death. I've just been to see him in the casket, and to think that I shall see my loved ones like that, or that they will see me. If you're used to looking on death, I've never seen it so close." Well, in September of the next year, their first little boy was born, Marie Joseph Louis. And Zélie wrote, "Oh, he's a lovely little boy, so big and so strong. I couldn't wish for a finer child. And excepting Marie, I've never had one born so easily. If you knew how I love him, I think my fortune is made." Famous last words. Zélie dreamed already of this little baby just born becoming a priest, and she was going to make him a lace alb for his ordination. Now, Zélie, as a girl, had fallen on her side and hurt herself, and after 3 children, she couldn't nurse this little boy, Joseph. She had to find a wet nurse named Rose in a village 5 miles away, a woman they would have to call on again. She wrote, "As a New Year's gift, I dressed Joseph up like a little prince. Oh, if you knew how nice he looked and how he laughed. But the emptiness of this world's joys. At 3 o'clock in the morning, we heard a loud knock at the door. 'Come quickly, your little boy is very ill.' They walked 5 miles in the snow one way to this nurse's home, but Joseph wasted away and died 6 weeks later. Their second little boy was born the next December, 1867. They called him John the Baptist, Jean Baptiste. Again, Zélie couldn't nurse him. They got Rose to come in from the country to nurse the baby, but the little boy still developed gastritis and bronchitis. During those years in France, 19% of infants died after birth. This was before pasteurization, antibiotics, sterilization of baby bottles. Zélie walked twice a day to see this little boy at 5 o'clock in the morning and at 8 o'clock at night, 5 miles one day. There was some slight improvement and they brought him home, but they had made a mistake. Zélie wrote, "It breaks my heart to see a baby suffer like this. He has not closed his eyes for 48 hours, and he's doubled up with the violence of the pain." After he died, she wrote, "Oh my God, must I put him in the ground? But since you will it, your will be done." The next year, 1868, her father died. She and Louis had brought him to live with them. She wrote, "Yesterday I went to the cemetery. Anybody seeing me would have said, 'There is the most unmoved woman in the world.' I knelt at my father's grave, but I couldn't pray. A few steps away, I knelt at the grave of my 2 little boys, still the same apparent indifference." Zélie obviously is in shock. At this very time, she was pregnant with the little baby who would grow up to be Céline. And all during this pregnancy, Zélie had terrible nightmares that this baby Céline would die too. In February of 1870, the Martins experienced a great shock in the completely unexpected death of Helen, their charming, pretty 5.5-year-old girl who was sick hardly more than a day. This is what Zélie wrote. I looked at Helen sadly, and I began to cry. Then she put her little arms around me and did her best to comfort me. All day long she kept saying, my poor little mama has been crying. I sat up with her, and she had a very bad night. I asked her if she would take her soup. She said yes, but couldn't swallow it. However, she made a last effort, saying to me, if I eat it, will you love me better? Then she suffered dreadfully, and I didn't know what was happening. She looked at a bottle of medicine the doctor had ordered and wanted to drink it, saying that when it was all drunk, she would be better. Then she said to me, see, I shall soon be well again. Yes, very soon. At that moment, her little head fell on my shoulder, her eyes closed, and 5 minutes later she was dead. When Louis came in, he burst out sobbing, crying, my little Helen, my little Helen. Then we offered her to God together. I spent the night beside her. She was even lovelier in death than in life. I dressed her myself and laid her in the coffin. I thought I would die myself, but I didn't want anyone else to touch her. It was at this time that Zélie's older sister, the visitation nun, Sister Marie d'Aucité, wrote these consoling and even prophetic words to Louis and Zélie. One day your faith and unflinching trust will have a magnificent reward. Be sure that God will bless you, and that the measure of your sorrows will be the measure of the consolations reserved for you. For if God wills to give you the great saint you have so desired for his glory, will you not be well repaid? Well, they weren't repaid quite yet. 6 months later, a little girl was born, Melanie Therese. The parents went through the same drama. Zélie couldn't nurse, but this time they couldn't find a wet nurse. Rose was not available. Zélie and Louis were desperate, and they had to give the baby to a woman they didn't know. The woman took the baby into her home and let the baby starve. Louis knocked on the door of this home and found the baby lying all by itself and took the baby home, and then went right out in the middle of the night looking for a wet nurse. Melanie, meanwhile, died on her mother's lap. She wrote later, you can't imagine what this baby suffered. I'm utterly desolate. I so love this child. At each bereavement, I always seem to love the one I lose more than the others. Oh, I wish I could die too. In December 1872, Zélie is expecting her 9th child, whom she will name Therese. She wrote, I'm expecting my little angel any day, and I'm very perplexed because I haven't found a nurse. If God would grant me the favor of being able to nurse this child, I'm madly fond of children. I was born to have them, but it will soon be time to finish with that. I'll be 41 this month. That's old enough to be a grandmother. Louis was 50. Therese was born on January 2nd in the year 1873 with the same digestion problems, the same gastritis as the other babies who had died. They set out to find Rose. Rose finally came to their house and looked at the baby and said, "You've brought me here for nothing." And yet Somehow Therese started nursing, but fainted and was seemingly unconscious for 15 minutes. But then the little baby Therese smiled and seemed to have survived. Zélie wrote, "I doubt purgatory will be worse than this. Well, one more heavy trial is over." Not quite, because Therese had to go back to the country to live with Rose for 15 more months so that she could nurse, and their oldest daughter, Marie, who was 13, was between life and death with typhoid fever at home at this very time. I'd like to read my very favorite letter from Louis and Zelie. We've heard a lot of sad letters or excerpts from Zélie. I'd like to read a letter that will make you laugh. Zélie has just taken her second daughter, Pauline, back to boarding school in Le Mans, as we say in English. It's 1875, and Zélie's taking the train back home to Lisieux that evening. She writes, "I put myself in a little corner of the waiting room so that no one would disturb me. For 3/4 of an hour it was quiet, and I was deep in thought when I saw a woman with 2 little children arrive. In addition, she had 2 enormous packages." And this is Zélie. "Seeing her predicament, I left my thoughts to go help her. She was also going to Alençon and had been traveling for 3 days like me. She had been traveling for 3 days like this, even during the night. She was taking these innocent creatures 600 miles to place them with someone, since she couldn't keep them because of a job she has with her husband. I can't tell you what I suffered to see her abandoning these 2 poor little ones, and yet she looked like a good mother. I would rather die than leave my children like that. She, on the contrary, didn't seem to be too affected by it. Well, I put myself to work helping this woman carry her children and the packages into our compartment in the train, but it was too much for the 2 of us. An employee of the train station came to our aid, and he took one child under his arm and put us into a compartment where there was already a woman there. She made quite a face when she saw us get into her compartment. To cheer this lady up, I wanted to tell her the story of the long journey of this mother and her children, but the woman didn't answer me. Embarrassed, I said to myself, I absolutely have to know if she is a deaf mute or not. Finally, I was able to make her say a few words. Then I was happy to see that she was neither deaf nor mute, and I left her in peace. Well, not completely, because she and I had to take care of both the little babies all the way to Alençon. We talked and rocked the babies in the train, and when we arrived in Alençon, I took the little baby all well wrapped up and went first into the waiting room. Your father, that's Louis, was waiting there for me. He thought I was holding a package, and he came to relieve me of it, and he seemed quite surprised to see a little hand come out. I told him that I had brought him a little girl and that I had brought her home. He didn't seem too happy. Finally, the mother arrived. We carried the little girl to the woman's parents' house, and we didn't get home until midnight. And then Zélie concludes with this beautiful phrase which summarizes her so well. So you see, my dear Pauline, I'm always finding little children to help along the way. A few times in Zélie's letters over the years, she worries about a lump in her breast. The day after her 45th birthday, a doctor told her it was too late to operate and that she was going to die. Her family insisted that she and her 3 oldest girls go to Lourdes to pray for a miracle. They did, they went, but everything turned out wrong, and physically, Zélie came back home much worse. And yet, over the years, God had built up Zélie's faith so much that she was able to say, "There are graces beneath all this. The Blessed Virgin has said to us what she said to Bernadette. I do not promise you happiness in this life, but in the next." Zélie's letters show a total surrender to God over the next few months. She continued to work and dedicate herself to her children and her husband. In one letter, she wrote, "My arm on the side where I'm sick refuses to do anything, but my hand still wants to hold the needle for my lace." Zélie died on August 28, 1877, at the age of 45, leaving her husband with 5 girls under the age of 18. The loss was especially traumatic for the littlest one, Thérèse, who was just under 4.5 years old. Louis and his 5 girls made the difficult decision to move to Lisieux to be near Zélie's brother Isidore and his wife Céline and their 2 little girls. Louis and his daughters had a happy, sheltered home. His daughters grew up and one by one entered the convent except for Céline, which was a great sacrifice for him, although he supported their vocations completely. But the real sacrifice came in his early 60s when he began losing his memory, and his character would change alarmingly sometimes. For example, once he disappeared for 4 days and was found in another town. He would hallucinate. Once he took a revolver and scared his daughters to death, saying he was defending them from the enemy. From his medical records, we know that Louis was suffering from arteriosclerosis complicated by uremic poisoning. Some of us know the anguish of having a loved one who has suffered from dementia. I know what that's all about. But in the 19th century, there was no medication, no treatment, no convalescent homes. His brother-in-law Isidore, who was the girl's legal guardian, convinced him that something drastic had to be done. So one day, Isidore and some men came to get Louis, and they said, "Come, Louis, let's take a little carriage ride." They ended up in the city of Caen, about 40 miles away, at the door of the Good Savior Mental Institution. This was one of the best treatments available in France at the time. It was like a city with thousands of patients, over 200 nuns and 300 employees. Louis was put in the ward for lucid and semi-lucid patients. But after all, a mental institution is still a mental institution. In Lisieux, the gossip raged, and it even drifted into the Carmelite monastery where the Martin girls were. People said, "Louis has gone crazy. He's in the crazy house. See what his life of virtue brought him?" People even said that he had lost his mind because his little girl, Thérèse, had broken his heart when he had entered the convent. Most of the time, Louis was lucid. Humanly speaking, people in the convent looked up to him because of his exemplary life. He refused a private room, for example, to live in the general ward with patient after patient. We have his medical chart. He said to the doctor who admitted him, I have never had a humiliation before. I suppose I needed one." The doctor replied, "Well, this one will certainly count." His daughters wrote they were praying for a cure. He replied, "Oh no, pray that I will do the will of God." It was only after Louis's death that Therese, his daughter, was able to write, Papa's 3 years of martyrdom, she uses that word martyrdom, were the most lovable, the most fruitful of my life. I wouldn't exchange them for all the ecstasies and revelations of the saints. She certainly didn't see that and feel that while he was in the mental institution. She was so shocked, as were all his daughters, that even Therese's handwriting, graphologists have seen that her handwriting was altered by the trauma of her father's illness. She gained great comfort through the words of the prophet Isaiah, chapter 52. He was spurned and avoided by men, a man of suffering, accustomed to infirmity, one of those from whom men hide their faces, spurned and held in no esteem. Louis was in the mental institution for over 3 years until he had strokes which paralyzed his legs and he couldn't walk. Then he was released to live with his brother-in-law and family and his daughter Céline. He died peacefully in Céline's arms on July 29, 1894, at the age of 70. In 2008, I was preaching a novena to St. Therese at a Carmelite monastery, and I won't say where, we'll just say far, far away. And after Mass, a woman came up to me, and I had said all this about Louis, and she said to me, Father, do you mean to tell me that the church is going to canonize someone with dementia? And I thought for a minute. I said, well, the church is not canonizing dementia. The church is canonizing someone who suffered dementia heroically. A few years before Louis started having his dementia, when he had been well, he wrote to his girls while he was away on a pilgrimage, everything I see on this pilgrimage is splendid, but our heart is satisfied with nothing but the infinite beauty that is God. Oh, my daughters, soon we'll have the intimate happiness of family again. It's this beauty that brings us closer to Him. I thought of the beauty of the Martin family and the beauty of so many of our families during Pope Francis' visit to the United States in September. At his last homily on September 27th in Philadelphia at the World Meeting of Families, Pope Francis said this, like happiness, holiness is tied to little gestures we learn at home in the family, little signs of tenderness, affection, and compassion, like the warm supper we look forward to at night, the early lunch awaiting someone who gets up early to go to work, like a blessing before we go to bed, or a hug after we return from a hard day's work. Love is shown by little things. That's why our families are the right place for faith to become life and life to grow in faith. Our good friend here in Redlands, Father Gregory Elder, has written this. Louis and Zélie's ministry, and yes, he says their ministry, was making beds, fixing meals, mending clothes, binding up little wounds, and educating their children, like that of a great many people today. Their canonization is a reminder that a great part of human sanctity is found in the ordinary and mundane side of life, where parents and spouses care for each other and their children day by day by day. And so, we see for Saints Louis and Zelie Martin and their family, and God willing, for our families, that when we do the little things and the hard things with much love and persevere, the Lord transforms what we do, and he transforms us too for his great glory. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Thank you. Merci.
Father, there are a couple of questions. If you would like to answer them.
Why, sure.
Okay. So the first question we have is, you mentioned that the cause for the beatification of the Martins' third daughter, Léonie, Sister Francois Therese of the Visitation, was opened in July 2015. What does the spirituality of Léonie have to offer the world that is different from the spirituality of Louis and Zelie and of Therese?
That's a good question. Léonie was the problem child in the family, the slow learner with so many difficulties, so many illnesses. She did I say she's been called the ugly duckling who became the swan. There's Saint Therese is associated with the rose. There's a book about Léonie called "And God Loves the Violet Too." In all our families, and many of us too, we feel like the violet, or we feel like the problem child. She wanted to be a nun. She was called to be one, but she finally made it on the fourth try and was very happy there. So many people pray to her when we consider ourselves to be a problem child, when we're not fitting in life, or when we're a family with a child we don't know how to deal with. And surely Léonie can be an inspiration for the church too. We hope that her cause, she's just been named venerable, which is the first step along the long road to canonization. So we'll see what the good Lord has in mind for her.
Okay, another question, Father, is what miracles were attributed to the Martins?
There were two very stunning miracles, both having to do with little babies who were born with very similar illnesses to the Martin children's. Piero in Monza, Italy, was the miracle for the beatification of Louis and Zelie Martin. He was really considered that he wouldn't live after he was born, and his mother was upset, was angry with God. It goes to say that we don't have to be perfect to have our prayers answered, but the whole family and many people prayed to the God through the intercession of the Martins, and their little boy was cured, and he's a young teenager now. He's 14. The miracle for the canonization was a little girl in Spain, in Valencia, Spain, Carmen, who was born, and right as she was born, the doctor said, prepare for the worst. Her parents had never even heard of Saint Therese, but they went to the Carmelite nuns in Valencia and asked them to pray, and the Carmelite nuns, told her parents, Carmen's parents, to about Louis and Zélie, and they prayed, and now she's about 4 or 5 years old today, and she was present at the canonization at St. Peter's Square on October 18th, rejoicing especially for all that God had done for her through these wonderful saints.
Thank you. And for anyone that wishes to ask questions, please scroll down a little bit and you'll see Ask Your Questions here. You can type in a question if you would like. Father, we have one more. Then Uncle Isidore Guerin was a very conservative activist for the monarchist party. Did that political twist complicate the Martins' home life?
The Martins were traditional Catholics. This was a time when, after the French Revolution, when the church had been disbanded and the church was just building up again, the Catholics had to um, uh, fight for their faith, and that's when there were many processions, and the Catholic Church was trying to show the beauty of our faith and the sacraments, and Isidore, who was a pharmacist first and foremost, later began to write columns supporting the faith, and he did much good there, and he inherited a lot of money at the end of his life, and he was the one who helped the Carmel of Lisieux publish the first edition of Saint Therese's autobiography, Story of a Soul, which helped to spread the world like fire. So we owe a lot to Isidore Guerin.
Okay, thank you. And then we do have another one.
Good.
Yes, we do have another one. It says, how would you suggest that we can make Saints Louis and Zelie better known and loved?
First and foremost, get people to read their letters. It's fascinating to read what they went through, and it's so wonderful to get caught up into Zélie and Louis's letters, and then they encourage us to do what we can to build up our families today. We all go through hard times, but there are very few of us who go through such hard times as the Martins went through. And so we don't feel quite so sorry for ourselves. As the saying goes, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's what Louis and Zélie and their daughters did spiritually, and we can do too.
Okay. I do have a comment here. Someone has said that excellent and heartwarming presentation, and the Martin family has many themes for modern reflection: problem children, grief, and faith during crises.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, that was a comment. And I think that was about it for the questions, Father Donald.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Edith. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, all of you who are watching. This has been a wonderful experience, and we hope these webinars grow for the Carmelite Institute.
Right. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Father.
And God bless you all.
Thank you. I would just like to end with just a few words, if I might. First, we'd like to thank Father Donald for his wonderful presentation in helping us to understand and to learn a little bit more about these brand new and just wonderful saints who are really relevant for our time, particularly this time of crisis in the family throughout the world. So thank you so much for that, Father Donald. And I would just like to remind everyone that this presentation was recorded. You may view it at YouTube or at our Facebook page, the Carmelite Institute of North America. Just click on the webinar symbol, the word webinar actually, or our website at carmelstream.org. And also, if you can, don't forget hit the little donate button. We would certainly appreciate that. And then we will continue to bring these wonderful live webinars as we continue through this year. And I would like to take this opportunity to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a blessed, happy, and healthy New Year. Thank you all for participating with us. Thank you.